Welcome, everybody, to the Short-Term Rental University podcast. And on this episode, I'm pleased to feature my friend, James Posner, who's a Mindful Advantage expert, a guru, and he's going to help us reduce our stress running our day-to-day lives and our business so that we can achieve our why.
Welcome to the STRU Podcast, your number one online hosting community, helping you achieve your goals through short-term rental investing. Now, here's your host, Richard Fertig.
All right, friends, I'm really pleased to introduce you to a friend of mine, a fraternity brother of mine, and affectionately known as my main man, Jim Posner. Jim, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking the time.
Pleasure to be here, of course.
So I want to just start off by telling everybody that I've known this gentleman for 30 some odd years, right? 1987.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, 30 years.
You were in my wedding. I was in your wedding in the Dominican Republic. We've spent a lot of time together. Yep. As our lives have evolved, we've spent less time, but there's always time to reconnect. And one of the most recent things that I'm very grateful for is as you started launching your business that we'll talk about, the Mindful Advantage, you came in and spoke to Charles and myself and a couple of other team members at my other business, Brilliant Transportation. And to be very direct, you know, I was interested, but I also wanted to help you out. I had heard a little bit about it, didn't know too much about it, and didn't really think too much of it. That said, although I didn't pursue it to the levels or the depths that you have, it's really been helpful for me. And so I appreciate you, and I want to thank you for helping me and hopefully everyone else that you're working with. But by way of introduction, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background? Make sure that you draw on your real estate experience and finance experience, because I don't want everybody to just assume that we found the foremost mindfulness expert and that's the end all be all. You've had a remarkable journey, and that's part of the story.
I'll tell you my journey into mindfulness, and I think it is a pretty interesting one and compelling as well. As you stated, you know, we both went to Cornell, and when I graduated Cornell, I thought I was going to, you know, take the business world by storm and just crush it out in the business world.
Well, can I tell you something?
Yeah.
You actually did. You know, you may not know this, but when we graduated Cornell, I think you were probably the fastest, most successful friend of ours out of everyone.
It's true, actually. I ended up starting my own business. I started a construction company, and the way I learned about construction is because the first job that I had out of college was in real estate. And if you are in real estate and managing real estate, you have to actually learn quite a bit about construction. So I kind of parlayed my real estate job into a construction career, and I started a construction business, and it was very successful. And you know, I still have some real estate that is providing some income for me at this moment. I know, you know, that's what you're doing these days with your short-term.
That's been a great investment
rental
for you.
It's been unbelievable.
I know the apartment, and I know the numbers, and it goes back decades.
To your point, that was one of my first successes. I actually was able to buy a couple of apartments in Manhattan, and I was living in one, and I was basically living for free because the rental income that the second apartment threw off more than covered my mortgage and my maintenance. So it was an amazing investment. So yeah, the power of real estate. And like I said, so my real estate career kind of pointed me in the direction of construction. I had this opportunity that presented itself to start a construction company with a partner, and it went really, really well. But an interesting thing happened while I was doing that construction. I got bit by the Wall Street bug. And
can I just interject one thing? Because I knew you through this time.
Sure.
I think it's important and probably part of the journey, and you may not think of it, but I think you also found that particularly stressful, right? There was a really good part of the job, but there was parts of the job that you didn't really like.
The construction.
The construction job, right? So you were interested in Wall Street, and so you did that. But it was also you had run your course in the construction. It was stressful, and I don't know whether it was the hours or the amount of money or the actual job itself. But in and of itself, that ran its course.
Right. It ran its course, and I got bit by the Wall Street bug. While I actually was doing the construction, I started to day trade. This was the beginning of, E-Trade and online trading accounts. It was back 1998, 99, and the internet bubble was just expanding. And quite frankly, I was able to take a little bit of money and turn it into a lot of money by essentially swing trading, which is not the same as day trading. Day trading is you're in and out in one day. Swing trading is, a little bit longer term, maybe the time frame of a few days or a few weeks. And while I had my construction job, I'd walk from one meeting to a job site, and on the way, I'd stop at a bank that had a Bloomberg terminal and check my stock quotes. This was before smartphones. So, I was kind of walking around the city and day trading and checking my portfolio between job sites. So it was interesting. But I really got bit by this bug, and I decided that, I want to pursue this as a career. So I got a job as a market maker with one of the largest market making firms in the country. And of course, the timing was not perfect for me. And it was, again, the internet bubble was bursting, and I was one of the last people hired by this market making company, and then layoffs just started to happen after the internet bubble burst. And round after round of layoff was going on, and then finally my name got called. I got laid off, and when I got laid off, it was extra difficult because my wife was pregnant with our first child. And there's a point to this, and this is how I kind of found mindfulness, because I basically became an anxiety-riddled mess when I got laid off.
What year was this?
This was 2003, so it was after the internet bubble burst, and Wall Street had completely changed also. Literally, I think 50% of the employees on Wall Street got laid off. I just didn't even have that much experience on Wall Street. I didn't want to go back into construction. So I just thought to myself, God, how am I going to get another job? I don't want to go back to construction. Who's going to hire me? I don't have much experience. There's tons of people that have just gotten laid off with much more experience than me. And, I would just have these constant thoughts and ruminations of, how am I going to pay for my new family? And how much more time do I have before my money runs out? And so I'd be constantly worrying about the future, and I was pissed off about the recent past. Why did I get laid off? Why not that other guy? My boss was a jerk, so I just was unable to be present and think in the present moment. And that's what you hear, that term you hear all the time now, being present. Well, that's what it means. We spend so much time worrying about the future or ruminating about the past, and that is actually the definition of stress and anxiety, worrying about the future or ruminating about the past. So if you're the student, maybe you're, what if I don't do well on the test?
Right.
What if I don't get into this college? Or why wasn't I invited to this party? So, the student has these ruminations about the future and the past. The businessman, what if I don't close the deal? How am I gonna, then my boss is gonna be mad at me. Why did this person say this to me? Why didn't this person return my email? So, we constantly worry about the future and the past, and it's very difficult to be present. So, getting back to my job loss, I tried a whole bunch of things that typical Western men like to do. So, I started to drink heavily. That didn't really work. I went to a psychologist who put me in touch with a psychiatrist and put me on antidepressants. That didn't really work for me. I know that's a very good and viable solution for a lot of people, but for me, it just didn't resonate too well. And
did it have side effects, or it just didn't help?
It just didn't help.
Okay, so because I hear a lot of people who are on medication that just say, like, I didn't like the way that I felt on it. It wasn't that so much. It just didn't alleviate the symptoms.
It just didn't. Exactly. For me, it was a Band-Aid on a much bigger open wound. I felt like it was treating the symptoms and not getting to the root cause of the problem for me. Again, cool. I know it's a good solution for a lot of people, so I don't mean anything disparaging towards that industry. And then I started to have panic attacks. So one time I had a panic attack that was so bad, I had to go to the hospital. I thought I was having a heart attack. And the one good thing that came from that experience was that the emergency room doctor said to me, you know what? 50% of the people I see in here every day are here because of an anxiety attack. So, at least I walked out of there not feeling so bad, not feeling like I'm the only one going through this. But I walked out of there and I still just had no place else to turn. And, here I am trying to get a job, and I know I looked a mess. I wasn't sleeping. I was constantly worrying. I was drinking heavily. And obviously I was so full of anxiety that I was having panic attacks. And quite frankly, that was one panic attack that was bad enough for me to go to the hospital, but I was kind of having these mini panic attacks quite frequently. So thankfully, a couple of weeks later, somebody said to me, you should try something called mindfulness-based stress reduction meditation.
Just a friend, a colleague?
Actually, a family member.
Okay.
Believe it or not. So I heard the term meditation, and I was just like, I had this image of some weird guy sitting on a mountain, with the fog rolling in some robes, and maybe with a couple of disciples, playing gourds or something. That's what I thought meditation was. I just, it was nothing I would ever have considered doing before, and that was kind of the stereotype that came to mind for me. But I was in such a bad place. I just felt like, all right, you know what? Let me give this a try. So I looked into it, made sure I wasn't joining a cult, and
can we just stick with that for a second? Because, again, I've known Jim for a long time, but the people that are listening to this or watching this don't. Jim is about as far from anybody who I would think would embrace mindfulness or meditation. Grew up in New Jersey, very athletic, very fit, just not necessarily open-minded historically about sort of like alternative medicine, alternative solutions, just very like by the books, right? Like you studied hard, you played hard, you worked hard, you played sports hard, and like that's what you do.
Absolutely.
Right? But this counter sort of culture.
If anything, I would have even, I'm somebody that frankly would have even thought that people that used depression as an excuse not to do things or something, were weak. I hate to say it, but then here I became one of these people that was consumed with this anxiety and this event-driven depression, and it's paralyzing. I mean, it is really, really paralyzing. So,
how about your relationship with your wife? Was she like,
listen,
super helpful, or also unaware of what to do? I mean, I must imagine that was helpful but challenging too.
Absolutely challenging. Here we are. We had I was laid off. When I was laid off again, she was pregnant, and then during my job hunt and this period that I was, drinking heavily and having panic attacks, and we had a newborn daughter, and thankfully, my wife knew me well enough to know that I was beating myself up, not because I was unhappy with our relationship or anything like that, but just that I was, not happy with my professional career, and I was basically throwing myself a pity party. I just was really, I couldn't get over the fact that I had gotten laid off, and of course, ironically, the layoff had nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? But I told myself it did.
Right.
And I'll get into that in a little bit, but that's where the mindfulness comes in, is that, again, this was before LinkedIn and social media, but I did everything that you're not supposed to do when I got laid off. I basically created this wall around myself. I told myself that I got laid off because I was a failure. And what you should do when these types of events happen is you should tell every single person in your family, your network, your friends, hey, I got laid off. Let's go have a cup of coffee and talk about opportunities, or help me network and that type of thing. That's what you should do. But
I was laid off.
Yeah.
I lost a really big job, a very successful job. I ran, as you know, a $4 billion portfolio. We invested in hedge funds all over the world.
Yeah, so you can
I was
relate.
co-head of investments, and I was laying everybody off until one day I got tapped on the shoulder and I got laid off, and I had just an incredible amount of overhead, wife, 3 daughters, multiple homes. Yeah. And, I can tell you the biggest eye-opening thing about getting laid off for me was how much I identified with the job.
Right.
Right. And my identity, Richard, has nothing to do with a job.
Right.
A job is a function. And so unlike you, and we're going to get off me really quickly, but unlike you, I didn't do some of the things that you did. I found myself with a ton of time because nobody was hiring in finance.
Right.
And so I did a Forrest Gump. Guapo and I started jogging and started running more and getting more and more fit and getting more and more healthy, and started to think a lot, and ultimately decided that it was unfair for me to expect somebody to hire me if I wouldn't hire myself, and then decided that this was my opportunity to be self-employed, and that was it,
Yeah.
But I think it's really important that we show fraternity brothers, same Ivy League institution, both in finance, both in real estate, and yet you took a left and I took a right.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm right and you're wrong.
No,
I'm just saying people are wired differently and different things happen.
It's at that moment in time also. It's
exactly.
You know what I mean? It's if I maybe had gotten laid off 2 years later, maybe I would have taken a right instead of a left. It's
and so this is one point that I want to just stress to everybody, which is just kind of one of the things that I'm a big believer in is about being self-reliant and being optimistic. And here are 2 guys. We had a great time in college together, great time after college, great families, great kids, great everything. And we were both laid off, right? So a job is great, but it's a moment in time. It's an end to it's a means to a goal, but it's not us. It doesn't define you. It doesn't define me. And so if you get laid off or if you were laid off, the future is bright. You just have to do some homework. And so now I want to hear.
Don't crawl into the shell and wither away. What you need to do is you need to get yourself out there, network, talk to as many people as you can, and be open-minded also. Don't necessarily, have the blinders on and, I just want to do this, Be open to looking at other opportunities as well. And you actually,
yeah. Listen, I think it's
you went in a completely different direction.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I was co-head of investments at this $4 billion hedge fund, and both co-heads got laid off on the same day. And my company did a classic move, which was go hire a new guy, blame the 2008 world financial depression on the 2 old guys, and then save some money and hire one guy. I mean, it's a classic playbook.
Yeah.
My ex-wife was really, really to this day is angry and bitter and so on. And I'm kind of classic business move. I would pull that move, right? I've seen that move. I would do it. So no hard feelings, no resentment. It just happens. But I think what's kind of interesting is the other co-head wasn't necessarily open-minded, said, I have to stay in finance, I have to be in hedge funds, I have to do this. And I think he had a couple of opportunities, but at a lower price point, right? The world priced down our skill set tremendously.
Yeah.
And so if I was making $1, maybe the new clearing price is 25 cents, or maybe it's 30 cents. And from what I know, the other co-head just was unwilling to ratchet down. It was so much of his identity. I'm worth $1.
Right.
And so I don't know the exact details of it, but I believe he remained unemployed and searching for employment for years.
Yeah.
And in less than a year, I was up and running in an entrepreneurial venture. So to your point, it is important to be open-minded.
It's important to be able to pivot and be resourceful. So I'll talk more about, being resourceful in a second, and how I actually did end up getting back into the workforce, because it's interesting. But, so I took this mindfulness-based stress reduction meditation course, and again, I felt like I had no other options. So, I did a little research on it.
Nothing to lose.
Right. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. And not only am I going to do it, though, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all in. So I took this 8-week course, and there's one class every week for 8 weeks, and they give you homework. What's the homework? Well, you meditate. They teach you how to meditate and practice mindfulness. And, within weeks, I found it to be transformative. And after I finished the course, within a couple of months after the course, I stopped seeing the psychologist. I got weaned off the antidepressants by the psychiatrist. I had my drinking under control. I've never had another panic attack in my life.
That's amazing.
So ever since then, I've been practicing mindfulness and meditating. But the interesting thing is that I was very much a closet meditator still, because for me, it still had this kind of connotation that people were going to think I'm weird if I told them that I was meditating. And again, to your point earlier, I don't think I fit. Not that there is a type of person that meditates. There's, all different types. But for me, the stereotype was some kind of maybe weird looking guy that, and people would think I'm weird if I told them I meditated. But slowly I started to tell my friends. So, all of whom and without fail, I had people tell me, tell me more about this because last year I had a panic attack, or, there's a reorganization going on at my company right now and I'm really stressed out. So, the light bulb went off. This was after 4 or 5 years, and I was working back on Wall Street, that I decided, what? The world really needs this, and especially in this day and age more than ever before. And why is that? Because we're constantly wired. Everybody is tethered to their phone. So the first thing most people do when they wake up in the morning is look at their phone and check their email. The last thing people do before they go to bed is look at their phone and check their email. And most often, it's their work email also. So the old days of, like my father would come home from work and he was home. There were no smartphones. There was no such thing as email. You shut it off, because even if there was something that was screwed up, there was really nothing you could do anyway. Right. So, you know what I mean? It's like, I can't worry about it anyway. And that's the way the world functioned. And, now, we have these just constant fight or flight triggers, which create a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. So people need to really learn mindfulness to give themselves a little mental vacation. One of my teachers says what it really is all about is taking the mental garbage out. And so, at this time, again, I was back on Wall Street. I actually got my new job on Wall Street by standing outside the Mercantile Exchange and handing out resumes. Again, pre-LinkedIn and all that stuff. So there weren't a lot of jobs to be found. And just so happened that the vice president of human resources was outside smoking a cigarette. And I was just walking up to, people that I would see come out of the Mercantile Exchange building, and I would hand them my resume and try to strike up a conversation. And thankfully, he took my resume and put me in a job that was kind of a low-tier job. But he was like, listen, come in, you're overqualified for this job, but what you will get is you will learn a lot about the commodities industry, and you'll move up very quickly. So, interesting story. I was basically a price reporter in what at the time were these, cacophonous, very noisy.
There you go.
Pits where the trading went down. Excuse me, can't talk right now. But so I was, the people would have these hand signals. I know you spent some time on the floor in Chicago, so you understand it. And as a price reporter, I'd have to capture the trades that would go on in the ring and report the prices. And interestingly enough, for the first few weeks, nobody would talk to me. And it turns out that people thought I was actually an undercover FBI agent because I did not fit the stereotype or, fit the normal look of people that were these price reporters. The price reporters, quite frankly, most of the times, they just were people that didn't go to college or whatever, and they didn't look like me. A little bit more of a Wall Street looking pedigree. But so finally, I had somebody come and fix my collar once, and later on, a few months later, he told me he was actually checking me for a wire. I mean, so kind of crazy. But in any event, I did end up moving my way out of that job and into a more senior job. I never actually traded again, but I moved up through the compliance ranks, and I ended up settling options markets and complex options, calendar spread options, and all sorts of options on the energy and metals. And it was an interesting job. But, again, through that time, I knew that I wanted to actually make a complete shift and teach mindfulness to corporate America. So that's what I wanted to do. So, ironically, I got laid off again in 2015. I actually have to say that I wanted to get laid off. I had discussions with my family about starting this business, other friends, and with the layoff this time, I got a nice package. There was a reorg at work. It was nothing to do with me, actually, and just like the first time around.
Well, for people that don't know, obviously the commodity exchanges and the mercantile exchanges and all that have been disrupted by sort of online, and there's no open outcry pits anywhere, and that's a shame because that was, some of my fondest memories. I absolutely loved and enjoyed that, but
it was insane.
It's a dying. It's dead actually.
It's dead.
There is no more pits. I don't think
the
open
pits are
outcry
now
exists
closed.
anywhere.
I think last year they closed the last ones.
So anyway, you lost your job again. You were looking forward to it. You got a nice package.
Yeah, so I got a nice package, and it was the opportunity for me to pivot and start this business that I wanted to start.
And for those of us that are just listening and haven't seen the thumbnail, what is the name of the business and the website?
It's called The Mindful Advantage, and it's themindfuladvantage.com. And I teach smart, forward-thinking people and corporations. I've worked with hedge funds. I've worked with athletes. I work with a lot of schools, and I work with a lot of C-suite individuals also. I teach them how to use and really harness the power of mindfulness to lower their stress and increase focus and productivity and enhance their problem-solving ability and achieve peak performance. Really, mindfulness.
But hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
You just sort of threw that last thing under the, you included it, but that's key. Peak performance.
Yeah.
Talk to us about peak
exactly.
performance,
So,
please.
If you can kind of roll it back to my story in the beginning, I was constantly ruminating about the past and worrying about the future. And that's what we as humans do, okay? We constantly do that. And again, that is the definition that I have for stress. When you worry about the future and ruminate about the past, you can't be present. A good example is you ever read 10 pages in a book and then all of a sudden you kind of are like, wow, what the hell did I just read? Well,
that's happened to me a few times.
Yeah. How about you commute from point A to point B, you get to point B, and you're like, wow, I don't remember anything in the commute. That's because your mind is wandering. You're thinking about something in the future or something that happened yesterday or a week ago, and you're not being present. So when you are not being present, you just can't focus and be as productive as you would be able to if you are in the present. Now, if you think about this in a number of different ways, again, all those thoughts that you're having about the future and the past, it's essentially all garbage, okay? Most of those things that we worry about don't come to fruition. There's this great Mark Twain quote, most of the worst things in my life have never actually happened to me.
Right.
So that's what we do as humans. And when you can take that mental garbage out, again, I was talking and saying before how one of my teachers refers to this as mental garbage, because that's what it is. To give you an example, some of the science behind this, just so you have an idea of how much mental garbage there is. So 90 to 95% of our thoughts occur on the subconscious level. So getting back to my story, how am I going to get another job? How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to take care of my family? Why did I get laid off? Why not the other guy? Those are all thoughts that are constantly circling around and very much on the subconscious level. I mean, I know I'm having them, but they're so prevalent. They're very much on the subconscious level. Now, 50 to 80,000 thoughts. That's how many thoughts we have per day. So 90 to 95% of our thoughts are on the subconscious level and 50 to 80,000 thoughts per day. All right. So now the scariest part is that 80% of our thoughts are negative and recurring. So, that's why my story is a pretty good illustration of what happens. But, I was in an extreme place, but for most people, again, What if I don't close the deal? Then I'm not going to be able to get my commission check, or my boss is going to be pissed at me. Why didn't this guy email me back? This is what we do to ourselves. So with mindfulness, we're really just training ourselves to take that garbage out, recognize that it's garbage, and become present. And we can get into a little exercise for that in a few minutes. So that's kind of.
So here's
how
my
it
question,
works.
going back to the peak performance thing.
Oh, yeah, right.
First off, define for us what peak performance is.
So peak performance is really, great question. It's really being able to be in the moment, concentrate on the task at hand, and again, not let thoughts about the future or the past interfere with the current task at hand. And if you think about it, when we take that mental garbage out also, you start to be able to problem solve a lot better. Not only can you focus a lot better and be more productive at the task at hand, but you can problem solve better. Why? Because when you take the mental garbage out, it creates all this space for new ideas and new solutions to come in. So, when you start to meditate and practice mindfulness, you start to come up with new and interesting and innovative ways to solve problems and so forth.
So let me ask you this,
yeah.
because I think the analogy to sports is really easy for people. So let's just say that I'm a decent skier, but I'm not going to the Olympics. But if I continue to practice and train at skiing, I'll get better, and I still may never make it to the Olympics. So my peak performance may not be the Olympics, but it might be, whatever.
Right.
Some other level. Is it similar in your mind? Just because you practice mindfulness doesn't mean that you're going to achieve the wildest ambition in the world, but you're going to, over time, move towards whatever the peak that you could achieve is. Is that does that analogy work in the mind versus the body?
Absolutely. And again, this is kind of tip of the iceberg mindfulness. And there are, major topics with mindfulness include a mind-body relationship and a lot of other interesting things. But so your analogy for sports is a really good one. I've worked with some athletes. Now, how might this come in handy for a skier? Well, maybe as a skier, you're thinking about your last run and, this one mogul threw me off a little bit, or I screwed up at this gate, or, that turn didn't go the way I wanted it to. And it's going to start to get into your head. This is, I've been an athlete my whole life also. And this is what happens. You start to overthink things and ruminate a little bit about what happened the last time down. So with mindfulness, what we're doing is we're training ourselves to just kind of remove those negative thoughts, because it is a negative thought. And it doesn't mean that you can't learn from that bad turn you made, or catching the gate. It doesn't mean that you didn't make a mistake and you need to learn from it. That's not what it means. But you do learn from it. If you're an athlete, if you're in business, you learn from your mistakes. But what it means is, in that moment next time, that's not going to trip you up. Whereas maybe a lot of times in the past, these things, it's called getting into your head,
Right.
And what mindfulness is a really powerful, it's a tool. It's a powerful tool to help you just overcome that from happening again.
Well, one of the things that, and I started this podcast off by saying that Jim was kind enough to come in and work with my team at Brilliant Transportation, including Charles. And I think that the very first thing, on a more granular level, because right now this is all very sort of superficial and it's very theoretical. But I think one of the things that you taught us, was a very simple exercise, was just recognize when your mind goes to a negative place or a negative thought, right? So identifying the fact that you're beginning to worry or beginning to stress or beginning to think a negative thought. The first part of fixing a problem is recognizing that you have a problem, right? So it's like
it's
in
awareness.
your mind.
Recognizing mindfulness is really, it's another word for awareness. So, I like to say it's awareness of our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. As you get deeper and deeper into this practice, it's not just your thoughts, it's your feelings, your emotions that are associated with all of those thoughts that come up. Sensations in the body. Again, a lot of stress manifests itself in the body, backaches and neck pain. People, you feel it in your gut. People grind their teeth. So awareness of sensations in the body, awareness of the breath, awareness of your surroundings, and that's kind of deeper, but it starts out with awareness of your thoughts, no doubt. So one of the most powerful things you can do is just take the time throughout the day to just say, all right, what am I thinking about right now? And just kind of check in with your thoughts and then label the thought. So, you can catch yourself worrying about something and just say, you know what, I'm worrying about this right now, and then escort your attention to your breath. And the interesting thing about escorting your attention to your breath when you do that is that, of course, over time, we've all learned how to breathe incorrectly. We've unlearned how to breathe. We kind of take these short breaths into our chest. And so one thing that we need to do is relearn how to breathe. And the proper way to breathe is to breathe into your diaphragm. So, have you ever seen a baby in a crib, right? It's like their diaphragm is just going up and down, up and down. And breathing into your chest can actually create more anxiety. Sometimes it makes you feel like you're not getting enough air and can actually create a panic attack. So, one little quick exercise you can do is you can put one hand on your chest and one hand on your diaphragm, and you just kind of want to sit and in decent posture. It doesn't have to be perfect. And just the hand on your belly should move in and out. And the hand on your chest really shouldn't move all that much. And it takes practice.
Is as we do it, it's just calming to put your just to do this, just knowing that I'm trying it, I find it soothing.
Right. So, you know what? There's so much science behind what I'm talking about. Also, cortisol levels drops. Cortisol is the stress hormone. By breathing properly and training yourself to breathe properly into the diaphragm, you can lower your blood pressure. You can lower hypertension, your heart rate, all of these things. You know what? Also, when you're getting back to athletes, when you're more relaxed, you're most likely going to perform better on, for that next ski run. So it's not only just about being in the present, but it's also teaching yourself how to, breathe properly. So there's all these kind of different levels, this, awareness of your breath, awareness of your thoughts. But, a really good way to just start out with the practice, again, is work on that little breathing exercise and sit there and, notice your thoughts. And when your thought wanders to something about, I don't know, how many people have ever had an argument with their significant other or spouse in your head? It's like, when I get home, I know my wife's going to say this and, da-da-da-da-da. And most of the time it doesn't even happen, but this is what we do to ourselves. We have these thoughts, or you worry about what your boss is going to say to you, So you just sit there, and when you recognize that your mind has gone to that conversation with your boss, you just say, all right, you know what? I'm worrying about a conversation with my boss. Let me just bring my attention back to my breath. So you just literally label what's going on in your head. What does that do? Well, it brings it out of the subconscious. Remember, I always said 90 to 95% of our thoughts are on the subconscious level. Once you start labeling your thoughts and bringing awareness to them, that's what enables you to move through them. And that's what helps you to get past them. So, again, back to my story, which I know a lot of people can relate to. How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to get a new job? Before I learned mindfulness, those thoughts would just completely consume me, and and own me. Now, if my mind starts to go to these negative places, I would just say, all right, I'm worried about getting a new job, and then I'd bring my attention back to my breath and breathing properly. And breathing properly is healthy. It helps you oxygenate your body better. It helps with your immune system. Again, more scientific benefits of mindfulness, increasing the immune system because you're tending to your breath and breathing properly. Less stress, less anxiety, obviously healthier. But that's what helps you be present. And it takes practice, it's not easy. But
what I was going to comment on is we started the conversation earlier where you were saying the first time you got laid off, you weren't sleeping, you were stressed, you were drinking a lot, and you were a mess. And like, it's no wonder you didn't get a job because you were like this walking zombie or something, whatever.
Absolutely.
I don't want to like insult you.
No, I was.
But you weren't really employable. Even though there were no jobs or whatever, like you wouldn't hire yourself.
I often say exactly the same thing. I must have, I looked like hell. So who the hell would hire me?
So even though you can have those same thoughts, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? How am I going to get a job? Just focusing on your breathing and taking it out of the subconscious and identifying it, and lowering the cortisol or whatever the science is that you just talked about, may make it so that you don't have the panic attack and you sleep well and you're healthy. And now you go in for that same job interview, and instead of being a detriment to yourself, you might be your peak performing self in
Absolutely.
that interview. You may not get the job. They may not hire you, but it's not because you're your own worst enemy.
Right. I'm going to be much calmer. One thing I often say to people that are in sales, I work with a lot of companies in sales. It's, if you meditate for 5 or 10 minutes before you go in to have that sales meeting and you kind of clear your mind, well, the chances are when that prospective client has a question for you, instead of coming up with that same bottled answer, you're going to come up with maybe a unique answer in the moment that is going to put you in a much better position to close that deal. Also, you're going to be more grounded. And another big benefit of mindfulness is communication. And this present moment awareness. People that you are with pick up on that fact that you are present for them. And the likelihood of you closing that deal is most likely much higher. So I'm going into an interview. I'm selling myself. So same thing holds true. Most likely I'm going to connect. That's really the word there. So, I'm most likely going to connect a lot better if I'm practicing mindfulness than I would if I wasn't. And why? Also, because if you're not, you're scattered brain. You're thinking, maybe you're trying to think 3 questions ahead, or, oh my God, I can't believe I just gave this answer.
Well, it's like insecurity versus self-confidence.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So you're coming in and I think one of the things that I learned from the time that we spent together was sort of first identifying it, so taking it from the subconscious to the conscious. And then I don't know if this is just my interpretation of it or how I use it, or like a more advanced teaching that, if people want to contact you, they know how to find your website, themindfuladvantage.com. Is
yes.
that right? With the first?
Themindfuladvantage.com. Yep.
Perfect. But what I've, where I am now, and I don't actually practice mindfulness on a daily basis. I do some transcendental meditation from time to time. I spend time at the gym, which is really good for me and my mind. And then I spend time in the steam bath, and I find time to I carve out time for myself, right? Like I make that quiet time. But what I find is when I have these negative thoughts, the very first thing I do is I identify that I'm worried or thinking negatively. Then I stop, and then I say, what is the opportunity in that negative thought? And then I start to focus on that same thought from a positive perspective. That works for me, and that might be counter to your teaching or approach, but that's just so helpful for me.
Yeah, but you've trained yourself to bring awareness to how you're feeling at the moment and the thoughts that are creating those feelings at the moment. What I often say is quite simply, before I practiced mindfulness, my thoughts, feelings, emotions, used to control me. Now, through mindfulness, I control my thoughts, feelings, and emotions.
That's great.
And
Hold
if
on.
you
Repeat that again. Just the before and then the after.
Before
that's heavy.
I was able to practice, before I practiced mindfulness, my thoughts, feelings, and emotions used to control me. I mean, they could take me from 0 to 100, to panic and anxiety and all those places in no time. But now, because I practice mindfulness, I control my thoughts and my feelings and my emotions. And if you think about that, to your point of a second ago, that is probably one of the most powerful things that you could really ask for, is the ability for you to be able to control your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions instead of them having control over you.
So now bringing, and I think that's just incredibly powerful. And that's similar in concept to a business practice that I espouse, which is that instead of working for my assets, like I have to go get a second job and a third job, and I need to make more money, and I need a bigger W-2, and I need all this to get that house and the bigger house and all of that stuff. Instead of working for my assets, I'm consciously making the decision to have my assets work for me. I want passive streams of income of my assets that I've been working my butt off to start to return back to me, so that I am free to do the things that I want to do in the form of adventure and life experience and travel and spending time with my kids. And so it's the same sort of thing, right? Like we know we live here in New York City, and we know tens, dozens, hundreds, thousands of people that are basically slaves to their job and their lifestyle and their work and their money and so on and so forth. And I'm just sort of not personally saying, you know what? I have enough assets and everything else that I want. Let me take temperature of what's important to me right now, and I want to make those assets work for me. They work for me, not me for them.
Right.
But in your own mind and body, it's just incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're in the process of creating, something with what you're doing now. Big online presence and short-term rental university, and it's not easy to do that, and it takes a lot of work, and it's the mental game. There's a lot of, Gary Vaynerchuk always is talking about the mental game, and that's what mindfulness really can do for you. It's really help you with that mental game, because when you're trying to create something new and start something on your own, it's hard, right?
It's very hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of rejection. It's not easy. And
can we stick on
there
that
are a
for
lot
one
of
second?
days
Because I was just having.
There are a lot of days when you doubt yourself. So it's.
I would say I was just having a conversation with somebody that, based on what you and I are doing, being entrepreneurs and creating companies from scratch and so on, I think it's glamorous today. Gary Vaynerchuk goes off on that a lot too, and it's not for everybody. But it's also viewed as sort of like easy, or you have to be lucky, or you have to have the right skill set, or it's like the right place at the right time. It's like being an actor in Hollywood sort of thing. It's like a lottery. And the reality of it is, based on all of that, I think it's almost the opposite. Like I almost think being a lawyer or being a doctor is really easy because it's linear. Now,
yes.
You have to do hard work. You have to be smart, and you have to be intelligent. You have to study.
We're not
taking
anything away from. You have to be intelligent and work hard.
But that's pretty easy because it's prescribed. Here, Jim, you want to be a lawyer? Here's the formula. There's no secrets. Right? You want to be a mindfulness life coach, peak performance? You want to be helping people in short-term rental university? How? Where? Why? When? What do I do first? What do I do second? How do I know if I'm succeeding? How do I not? Right?
It's hard to quantify.
Complete, and it literally, to your point, comes down to, I believe, mindfulness, confidence, self-reliance, celebrating small milestones that people don't understand. Charles and I celebrated when we got a subscriber and a second subscriber. And then we celebrated when we got a like. And then we celebrated when we got a comment. And then we celebrated when somebody clicked our first affiliate link. And I remember telling my girlfriend that it was one of the most proud days I'd ever had in my business career, and I ran a $4 billion portfolio. Amazon sent me $1.74. That's like my favorite number in the world. $1.74. Charles and I celebrated it because we reached somebody, we had influence, they trusted us, they clicked a book that we recommended, and Amazon sent me $1.74. Could you imagine a grown man with 2 Ivy League? I'm the only Wharton MBA who celebrates $1.74. But it's a big deal.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, for me, I get a lot, it sounds corny, but I get a lot of joy when people send me emails and say the tools that I taught them have helped change their life. And I get...
It doesn't sound corny in the least.
I get a lot... But my point, the part that might sound corny, is I actually really want to try to change the world with every single person that I teach a little bit. And that's probably the corny part.
As do I. It's not corny in the least. It's a different goal, right? Like if I told Jim at Delta Chi in 1990 that's what you would say, you'd say, no, that's not what I want. But that's the beautiful thing about a journey and being self-aware and present and checking in with yourself. Like we mature. With age comes wisdom, right?
Journey is the key, man, because it's definitely a journey, and it's been fun and interesting, no doubt.
And that's a life worth living. So here's what I'm going to say. If people want to contact Jim for more information, themindfuladvantage.com.
Yes.
You have blogs and videos there and a YouTube channel.
I have a couple of things. So you can email me at Jim Posner, JIMPOSN as in Nancy ER, Jim Posner at themindfuladvantage.com. Another interesting product I have going on is something called the Don't Panic Project. And it's a whole bunch of engaging conversations to help empower, inspire, and educate people that are suffering from stress, anxiety, and depression. So conversations with psychologists, psychiatrists, pulmonologists, neuroscientists, happiness experts, people that have suffered intense depression and anxiety. I have one interview with a guy that in 1 year had 40 trips to the emergency room because of panic attacks. So the concept is that I just want to put out this information for people that have stress and anxiety and depression, and they can watch these interviews and learn just all different techniques, and hopefully one of those techniques will work for them. Conversations with just a whole myriad group of different people.
So is that a website or is that a YouTube channel or both?
It's www.thedon'tpanicproject.com, and it's if you type that in, it'll take you to my website and a tab there, and there's a whole bunch of interviews.
Cool.
And a lot of those interviews are also up on YouTube. So
cool.
Some interesting stuff.
So I want to just say thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. We're now going to go on Facebook Live for the people that are in the bachelor's track and also the master's track of Short-Term Rental University. We're going to get a little bit more granular and give some things that they should be doing and just test the waters, because I know that with the introduction when you came to my company, just starting to think about it and just putting some of these things in practice, and even though I didn't get fully educated, it was super helpful. And I can't thank you enough for helping me in that regard.
You're very welcome, man. My pleasure. You know it.
My man.
Definitely.
All right. So I hope you guys found this interesting and helpful. Please go visit the Don't Panic Project.
The Don't Panic Project and themindfuladvantage.com.
And this man knows exactly what he's talking about. He's living proof of it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Have a great day. And one other thought as it relates to short-term rentals, it is a stressful business. Who's coming into my house? Are they going to tear this up? What's going to happen? I didn't like the answer. There's a million insecurities that you're going to face on a daily basis. And the reason that we're introducing you to mindfulness and to the concept of being self-reliant and entrepreneurial is that you need to figure out healthy ways to deal with all this so that you can achieve your why. You can't burn out. You can't stall. You can't turn to drinking. You can't be a mess. You have to be present and available and get through it all. And if this tool is helpful, great. If it's not helpful, let's find you another tool. But we really want to make sure that you've got the right team and support in place so that you can actually achieve your why, because it's a long game. Success, this isn't overnight. This isn't about making fast money. This is about putting in the time and the energy, giving you the tools, the resources, and the support to see you the whole way through.
Amen. Well said.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
So that does it for another episode of the STRU Podcast. As always, all links mentioned are in the show notes below. And if you found this show helpful, please leave a review on iTunes. If you're serious about short-term rental investing, be sure to check out str.university. Till next time.